YouTube. Well, what a weird week. In general, really, but also on Ambridge. We began it with creepy Philip and the hapless Krusty. Is it just me, or does Philip sound like one of those guys who needs to have a good go with the Remington nose hair clippers? Maybe Krusty could do it. And if she slips and rips through a nostril, then so be it. Small price to pay, I say. Roy is under strict instructions not to be any more crackers than normal. His interview with the head trauma consultant was tricky. Have you exhibited any odd behaviour? Well, I've stood in my ex's girlfriend's garden and cried in the middle of the night. I've posted dog poo through a solicitor's letterbox and I've made a sex spreadsheet. But that was before the head injury, so you're going to have to narrow it down a bit, said Roy. The three stooges met for a rewilding session. Well, two of them. Rex is taxiing, said Phoebe, making him sound like a 747 at Stansted. Justin seems to have developed the ability to know what's happening without being told. The rewilding meeting and then the pub. Maybe it's like the bat signal. Lillian struggles up to the attic and shines a big J in the sky and boom, there he is. So he turned up and told Pip off, as her screen had bits of cow shit on it, and the rewilders' big decision for that day was to let some cows wander through a gap. They knocked down a fence post and were so delighted with themselves they had a bottle of champagne. I have to say, the three rewilding stooges set the bar fairly low for their achievements. I knock a fence post down every time I go to the recreation ground, and I don't feel it necessary to drink champagne. I just drive off hurriedly. Things are getting difficult for Philip and Gav. You can tell they are because Gav has started talking to his clenched teeth like this. Krusty is concerned about her gangmaster fiancé and suggested he had a massage on her at Gay Grable's, which sounded a bit much for the poor masseurs. But anyway, he said quite rightly that he thought it was inappropriate. The bat signal flashed. Justin sensed someone was in need of help, and he discovered Krusty, trudging through Ambridge like a Russian peasant woman. I have realised that is exactly who Krusty actually is. She's a character in Dostoevsky. Emma Grundy is from Hardy, Krusty, Dostoevsky. She tightened her headscarf and lit her pipe as Justin told her that what she could do to help Philip with practical things like going through Philip's paperwork. So she did. What is this invoice for a saddle and some bran mash, Philip? Then we went live to Borchester General for Lynda pooing herself. This may well have been prompted by Peggy's insistence on visiting her, and it was the only way Lynda could think of getting shot of the old bat. Peggy had struggled to think of an appropriate get-well-soon gift, so she opted for a pogo stick. Peggy got in the way generally, ate all Lynda's grapes, told Lynda that she reminded her of her mother, that she needed to employ the blitz spirit, etc., and generally showed herself to be the sort of person that describes the coronavirus as just flu and thinks this is the ideal time to have a family picnic. Brian was clearly as sick as the rest of us are at hearing Adam whinge about being tired. With his vast business experience, and a flash of genius, he fixed the problem by recruiting someone to help. My God, it's like Dragon's Den. Obviously, Adam said no, as if getting someone else to help me with my work would help me with my work. As if. I'm not employing Josh because he has not been cleared of selling stolen goods. I won't employ Ed because he was involved in fraud. And I won't employ Jill because she once threw a flapjack at a Sir Horror. I have my standards. Welcome to the manager of my hydroponics, Jazza McCreary. I bet if Charlie Thomas came back, he'd find an opening for him. That's all I'm saying. Robert went to see Freddie, burst into tears, and gave him a medal. Over at Brooker's, it was all about the kiddywinks. The big cliffhanger this week was, what colour is Josh's car? This cliffhanger would only work on the radio, obviously. Does anyone remember Bod? My favourite bit of Bod was when the conductor, who was a frog called Alberto, had to choose whether he wanted a strawberry, a chocolate, or a vanilla milkshake. I always held out for strawberry. I like to think the Archers were trying to bring that kind of tension back into drama. Once again, the Brookfield juniors showed the utter contempt in which they hold each other. Pip bought Ben a scratch card for his 18th birthday. Just imagine if you'd won, said Pip. I can imagine there'd have been a family meeting Usha would have hightailed it round there when she suddenly remembered that she was an expert in scratch card rulings. Ben would have had his arse sued off by the rest of the family, and the schism would have gone on for decades. Anyway, the birthday boy and his hapless siblings set off with all the world-weary sophistication of a church group on a coach trip to Cheddar Gorge. Pip had a complete breakdown on the bypass, and Joy Horville overtook them in her car and was flagged down by Ben, who was drunk and naked by this stage. Rather than asking if she could help, she started talking bewilderingly about Shawaddy Waddy. For our overseas listeners who may be happily unaware of Shawaddy Waddy, they were 5 men who looked like bricklayers with a penchant for pastel suits and sideburns, who sang, or thought they were singing, rock and roll. They were much beloved of family shows on Saturday nights, and so far anyway, do not appear to have been arrested for fiddling with any members of their audience. So good on them. Anyway, once they'd got Joy to shut up about Shawaddy Waddy, sounds funnier the more you say it, she expressed concern about the likelihood of the AA turning up. "I've waited hours for roadside assistance," she said, "and when something did turn up, it was Brian dogging." It was decided that Ben should spend his birthday evening with Joy. He's a big lad, and he barely squeezed himself into her midget, but they got there in the end, and off they went to Roadrunners. Typical Borchester that the only club worth going to is named after something that ends up repeatedly going over a cliff. And what was the upshot and outcome of all this? Well, Ben unleashed his potency on the horrified womanhood of Borchester, the dirty dog, and then tried to cover his tracks in a singularly inept fashion. If you are trying to creep unobtrusively into the house, alerting a woman who hoots like a startled owl every 2 seconds is probably to be avoided. He was, he said, with a girl called Chloe. "We may have unleashed a monster," said Pip, "or at the very least, a massive outbreak of chlamydia." So Ben's had his oats, and let's hope Philip's horses get theirs. The end.
If you enjoyed watching Lucy V. Freeman give you loads of gossip about Ambridge, and I don't know why you would, I'm not a fan of gossip myself, then you can subscribe to this channel by clicking the button. That means you won't miss any more updates on what's going on. And you can also listen to Lucy Roifield and other The Archers listeners on Dumpty Dum, the weekly podcast. Don't tell anyone I said anything though, will you?